the president, no?
Yeah, wake up call for the president. Sorry, hindi ko pala na-press. Ang dami kong dinaldala na. So, essentially, sinabi ko, President Marcos Jr. got the message. Base sa surveys, clearly hindi natutuwa ang mga, especially mga pinaka mahirap natin kababayan, Class E, 29% decline sa latest survey. So, the president got the message. Now he's scrambling for response. Do his responses make sense? Or what could make sense, Secretary Llamas?
Well, it's one of the few times na yung mga magsasaka, yung retailers, yung big producers, yung mga big millers ay nagkaisa na this was the wrong strategy, no? At
Yung rice
syempre
cup.
hindi naman yung rice cup, no? At yung iba pa nilang ginagawa this past few months, how to mitigate food inflation, no? Malinaw kasi dito sa very dramatic na pagbaba ng approval rating ng presidente, 15%, no? In just one cycle,
And 29% among Class E. 29. Ang laki nun. Almost a third.
Yes. Oo. Lalong-lalo na doon sa mga bumoto sa kanya. No? Ito yung DNE na bumoto sa kanya last election para magkaroon ng ganun ng kataas na mandate, di ba? So definitely the honeymoon is over, no? Sana ito ay wake-up call, no, sa presidente dahil yung Pulse Asia, nag-survey din sila eh. Yung disapproval rating ng presidente on inflation is 56%. No? Mas mataas, 16% lang yung nag-approve. So pag pinagsama mo yan, ay talagang hindi lang dapat gisingin yung presidente. Talagang kailangan mo siyang sampal-sampalin. No?
Inside the swimming pool, di ba? I mean, just to put things into context, you work under President Aquino. At this point, I think President Aquino's approval was 77%, I think net, no? And President Digong was around 80%. So, he's in the 60s territory. Pag sinama mo pa, pag ninet mo pa yan, medyo delikado siya, no? Double digit yung kanyang difference with President Aquino and President Digong. So his two immediate predecessors were far more popular than him at this point in the presidency. Second year pa lang. First quarter, second quarter pa lang second year. Ganyan kababa, no?
At ang kaibahan na Richard ay mas malaki yung kanyang mandate. Mas malaki yung kanyang nakuhang percentage ng boto kumpara kay Pinoy at saka kay Digong. Pero mas mabilis yung kanyang pagbaba. At mas malaki, 15%. Hindi nangyari yan kay Pinoy or kay Digong. I'm not sure about GMA, no, nung first year niya. Kaya dapat tignan niya itong writing on the wall na napakahalaga sa kanyang term as president, no. Siyempre, matagal na nating sinasabi, kailangan maglagay siya ng full-time Secretary of Agriculture. Partly para ayusin yung Department of Agriculture, partly para maging buffer. Kung may mga criticism man sa agriculture policy like sa rice, na pinromisa niya na bababa sa 20 pesos, na ngayon ay 60 na, no? Merong sisisihin. No? So yung isang role ng Secretary of Agriculture ay hindi lamang para ayusin yung departamento, kung hindi possible scapegoat no? Kung sakaling may problema. Pero itong pinili niya, ay parang hindi ganun kagaling eh. Parang yung main criteria dito sa kanyang pinili ay funder at saka kaibigan. Pero wala siyang history in terms of skill set. Halimbawa, katulad ni R.C. Balisacan, no, na kahit papano ay pinag-aralan ng hustong agriculture at mayroong mga proposals na in the past works. So hindi ko alam kung paano nito aayusin ang Department of Agriculture. Baka lumala pa dahil ang problema ng ating agriculture ay cartels eh. At itong pinili ay mukhang bahagi ng mga cartel, lalo na sa fishing, no? Kaya hindi ko alam kung paano niya aayusin ito without being rent-seeking, no? Dahil alam mo naman ang role ng mga ganyang klaseng mga taipans, no? They use their position para makinabang sila at saka yung kanilang mga kaibigan. Pwede na yung kanyang contribution kay President Bongbong Marcos is to be a buffer na hindi na masyadong sisihin
Punching
Si
bag kumbaga. Oo. Alam ko si Carl Llamas, medyo pagod ka yata ngayon. Don't worry, let me take over a little bit more. So this is the difference natin with Christian. No? Christian is a legit anchor, legit journalist. I'm a thinker, I'm a strategist, I'm a political analyst like you yourself, right? So let me take some of the punches here and also come in. No, kasi si
pwede
Carl
nga
Llamas,
ako magtanong sa iyo eh.
oh, no, exactly. This is a conversation. I want this to be done exactly
Yeah.
like what I do with Dr. Lele Claudio, no? So it's a conversation. So may mga nagsabi na, si Darian, salita ng salita. Excuse me, conversation po yan. Hindi yan one way. Paras kami madaldal. At ngayon, pagod na pagod yung ating co-host. So let me take over a little bit. Of course, understanding here is you need buffer. You're absolutely right. You need a scapegoat. And I think ang nangyari dito is medyo nagmaganda ng konti si Pangulong Marcos, thinking if he puts himself at the very front, he will get credit for that. He will show proactiveness, except things didn't work out, no? And in fairness naman to Marcos Jr., there are many factors na external also contributed to that. Just to give you a number, so since past year, the cost of Thai exports in the global markets increased by 50%. Obviously, hindi hawak ni BBM yan. Now, we import way more than from Vietnam than Thailand, but nevertheless, you can see the picture. Back in August, India imposed restrictions on their own rice exports, which once again put pressure. So, hindi nagagana yung Ukraine conflict excuse as much as before, obviously. Pero unfortunately for Marcos Jr., and to be fair to him, may pressures din sa Asian rice markets. But obviously, of course, alam natin pareho, Ronald, hindi naman nagre-research sa Bloomberg Magazine ng mga tao to see latest movements sa global rice markets. Sumisingil na ang taong bayan. Kaya I think both of us exactly said the same thing. It looks like the honeymoon is over and now people are becoming more performance-oriented. And the president's approval rating is way lower than both Aquino and Digong over the past decade or so. So very stark ito. Now, Secretary Llamas, the president is removing the price caps because obviously it didn't work. Obviously, it's not something you do in a free market economy, supposedly. And especially when you're trying to get investors. Actually, later on, pag-usapan natin because one big area also na bumaksak yung numbers ni BBM is ABC, which is us. And I think may kinalaman din ito dun sa broader economic and investment environment. But we go, balik tayo dito. So, at least there could be someone new coming in who will take the punches. At kung etong tao na to, feeling na it's worth it for whatever reason, then go ahead. But the other thing is, I think sasampan ng kaso na ngayon dun sa mga smugglers. So just after the survey comes out and just after Ronald Llamas and Haydarian and all gave their analysis, the next day magsasampa ng kaso laban sa mga smugglers and all. I think the timing is a little bit too obvious. But Ronald, Secretary Llamas, do you think that will kind of work? I mean, what should be done? Sabi nga, cartel. Itong malaking problema itong mga cartel na to. Performative ba ito? Or this could become something more serious? Because obviously, kung honeymoon is over, hindi madadalang tao sa performative lang. Sisingil talaga sila. If 6 months from now, ganyan naman yung situation and yung mga cartel ay walang nangyari doon. Do you think something more serious is going to be done here? Because wala nang choices. Something has to be done.
Yeah. Dagdag doon sa sinabi mo kanina, Richard, no? Ay yes, maraming external factors. Yes, hindi na pwedeng sisihin yung Ukraine war, no? Pero in spite of that, marami talaga external factors. Pero kaya yung mga external factors na ito ay ganyan katindi yung tama is because also of our historical structural problems with agriculture, no? Na hindi naman nangyari nitong nakaraang 1 year lang. So ganun yung pero then again, ang problema ni BBM, no? I doubt kung meron siyang appreciation, I doubt kung meron siyang aptitude para dito sa mga structural ills na ito, no? Pero kahit pag-usapan kasi yung mga tactical medium-term solution, ay hindi ko nakikita na yan ay mangyayari in the next 2 years. So in the next 2 years, I think the president has to contend with food inflation, no? Lalo na tingin ko dito sa pagpili niya ng bagong Secretary of Agriculture, hindi ko nakikita yung wherewithal na at the very least ay solusyonan itong mga at least yung mga immediate concerns dito sa agriculture, no? Kaya ang pwede ay yung sinasabi niya last zona. Magkakasama tayong dalawa eh. dun sa 1PH nung nag-SONA si BBM. Ang sabi niya, tapos na ang mga araw ng mga hoarders, ng mga smugglers, no, ng mga cartel, no, pumalakpakan ng gusto, di ba? Sa no? Kaya siguro sinisimulan niya ngayon dahil wala siya magagawa sa external, wala siya magagawa sa structural, no? I doubt kung may magagawa siya or yung pinili niya as Secretary of Agriculture. So ano yung path of least resistance? Manghuli siya. Gumawa siya ng ng mga scapegoats, ng mga political scapegoats. Na hindi naman talaga scapegoats, may kasalanan naman talaga eh. Pero it has to be dramatic. Hindi pwedeng incremental dahil very dramatic yung kanyang pagbagsak. At in the next 2 months, may bagong survey na naman yung lalabas. So, kailangan within that 2 months, yung gestation period, kailangan may impact kahit papano na seryoso siya. No? Na seryoso siya. Kahit hindi siya seryoso na paano ma-mitigate yung external factors na sinasabi mo, yung structural ills na sinasabi ko, at yung weakness ng kanyang cabinet. Paano yung hindi natin napag-uusapan pa, Richard, ay yung weakness ng cabinet ni BBM. No? Dapat kasi yung cabinet mo, no, ay yun yung collective buffer. Dapat yung cabinet mo ay even if we hate the father, yung kanyang cabinet ay the best and the brightest ng kanyang henerasyon. Itong cabinet ni BBM mukhang leaves much to be desired. Nung galing siya sa Indonesia, kung naalala mo, ang sabi niya, tapos na ang on-the-job training. No? Nag-indicate siya na magkakaroon ng cabinet revamp. Wala namang nangyaring cabinet revamp eh. Inappoint lang niya si Kibo, no? Inappoint niya yung bagong Secretary of Health, pero walang revamp. Ibig sabihin, yung siya mismo ang nagsabi na napatunayan na hindi nagde-deliver o hindi kayang maging maayos na cabinet secretary, hindi naman niya tinanggal. Hindi naman niya tinanggal. Namatay pa yung one of the few strong cabinet secretaries niya, si Secretary Ople, no? Whose heart is in the right place. Tapos naiwan yung mga natutulog sa pansitan, naiwan yung mga hindi tama yung mga policies, naiwan yung mga pinapackage yung mga investments na 90 billion dollars na wala naman. So, ito dapat yung kanyang linisin. Partly as a buffer, partly para ayusin yung kanyang cabinet. No?
Yeah,
dito sa kanyang going into the second year.
Yeah, Ronald, we'll talk more about that because speaking of cabinet, how good is the cabinet? We're seeing right now that even yung mga technocrats niya are coming under scrutiny because the performance is not very good in terms of attracting actual investments after all of that Grand Prix, world travel, all of the Magellan Junior stuff over the past year. So, pupunta tayo dyan. I mean, of course, I have extensively written on this issue. But before our conversation going on there, see, conversation, right? So don't worry, you don't have to do all the talking. Let me take some of the punches here too. But going back to this, ganito, do you think it's time for something like, kasi ako nag-propose ako ng Grand Coalition, no? Which is, why not, bring in Mar Rojas, take over the DTI, which we'll, I think, discuss more, because I think in DTI, we need also some movement there. And more importantly, why not bring someone like, Kiko Pangilinan, right? To take over agriculture. Didn't Senator Pangilinan actually take over the agriculture portfolio in the initial years of your Aquino administration, right? Bago siya bumalik sa Senado, di ba? So he has a background on that. I think for anyone who has bothered to check his online mga posts, tignan mo yung kanyang central theme nung tumakbo siya bilang vice-presidente. And I actually had the chance to also bump into him a few weeks ago sa Taiwan. He looks like someone who's genuinely invested in agriculture-related issue. He's a quite smart person. He's an activist and all. So hindi ko sinasabi yun dahil opposition siya, etc. But getting someone like him in the mix would have made sense, especially earlier. Kasi my sense is tatakbo ulit siya for Senate in 2025. So sana mas maaga siya nakuha. But nevertheless, we have more than a year before the next elections. Do you think getting someone like Mar Rojas or Pangilinan or something like bolt from the blue or kind of from, not your usual suspects coming in could actually help and bolster him? Considering that these people are if they're going to be coming in, it's probably because of their merit, no? Kasi galing silang opposition eh. Do you think that that's too crazy or could make sense?
Yeah, mukhang dahil sa not yet a desperate situation, but a very significant moment for the president, kinakailangan niya, tama yung sabi mo, Richard, kailangan niyang mag-isip outside of the
Outside the
box.
box. Yeah, that's what I
No?
want to say.
Yun yung kailangan niyang gawin, no? Partly dahil naghahanap siya ng mga hindi kanya pero merong mahabang karanasan, halimbawa sa agriculture, halimbawa sa trade, no? At medyo tested na. Ikalawa ay whether we like it or not, it can divert attention eh. Pag halimbawa kinuha niya yung mga tipo na katulad ng dalawang binanggit mo, medyo mapapaisip yung mga tao what's happening. So medyo
Of course.
mawawala ng kaunti dun sa mga fiasco ng rice cup, mawawala ng kaunti dun sa fiasco ng 20 pesos na rice, no? Mawawala dun sa weekly na tumataas na presyo ng gasolina, yung presyo ng kuryente na nadodoble, no? Medyo mawawala for a while. Habang naghahanap ka ng mga tactical solution sa mga problemang ito, kailangan mong makuha yung imagination ng mga tao. And by doing these things out of the box, pwedeng magkaroon ka ng space to do that. No? Kailangan niya ng space eh. No? Kailangan hindi mangyari na yung susunod na survey, bababa siya uli. Because it might become a trend. No? Kung next survey bababa siya significantly, then delikado siya going into the midterms. Pero tama rin yung sinabi mo na kinakailangan isang weakness ng presidente, inaasahan ko na gagawin niya this year eh. Hindi niya ginawa the grand coalition. No? Ang ginawa nila ay pinamprime nila yung Partido Federal na nobody takes seriously. Tapos yung lakas NUCD, nagbabakbakan siyempre si GMA at saka si Speaker Martin. So mas nandun sila nakafocus. Pero kung itutuloy niya yung Grand Coalition, yung KNP kasi ni Albi Benitez parang hindi na tuloy yung registration eh, no? So kailangan niyang hatakin yung NUP, kailangan niyang hatakin yung nationalista, no? Na very willing na maging part ng ruling coalition. Tapos yung lakas, no? Okay na lang doon as a junior partner yung Partido Federal, even if people don't take it seriously, no? So para magmuka na he is in control, no? Ni wala siyang political advisor, wala siyang political strategist, no? Tapos wala siyang political coalition, no? So lahat ito ay nakakadagdag sa kanyang problema, no? Nakakadagdag sa kanyang problema ng isang weak cabinet, nakakadagdag sa kanyang problema na wrong policies, no? Nakakadagdag sa kanyang problema na ang tingin ng tao ay nagkakahati-hati na yung kanyang unit team. So all that, maliban sa hindi lang yung inflation, ay nakakadagdag not necessarily dramatically but incrementally do sa total ng kanyang pagbaba, yung 15%. So kailangan lahat yan harapin niya, hindi lang isa. It's a multifaceted problem eh. Alam naman natin na Richard yung mga bagay na yan. Hindi lang naman isa yung source eh. May mga iba't iba pa na magkakaugnay eh. Yun yung kailangan niyang ayusin. Siya kasi mismo, I doubt kung may ganun siyang capacity eh. No? Si Secretary Bersamin, I doubt kung may ganun siyang capacity eh. Judge siya eh. No? Hindi niya linya ito eh. He's a judge for more than 3 decades at Chief Justice siya ng Supreme Court. So hindi niya trabaho ito, hindi niya skill set, no? Hindi niya ito.
Hindi
So
siya
sinong
Ronald
gagawa?
Llamas.
Oh.
Wala siyang Ronald Llamas. Let's just spell it out. No, I like this. What we're doing, Ronald, no? Kasi we're like two political strategies here. Of course, alam naman ng tao saan tayo, I mean, where our values and convictions are. Of course, both of us consider ourselves as progressives. But nevertheless, we're talking now as political strategies and what President Marcos Jr. should do. My sense kasi, Ronald, is kung hindi bumaba ng 11 points yung isa, then sobrang delikado ka, di ba? Kung ikaw lang nabubuhay, yung number 2 mo, your spare tire is actually doing very well, then delikado ka. Although, my sense is if the survey were taken today, or if it were a snapshot of end of September, siguro Sarah's number would have been also slightly lower because dito na yung full-blown effect ng confidential fund and all. But clearly, if you look at the pulsation survey that came out today, dun sa most urgent issue, ang layo pa rin yung issue ng corruption, right? Or concerns with corruption, dun sa issue ng like 70 versus what, 20, right? It's not even comparable. So clearly, mas vulnerable si BBM kaysa kay Sara because mas malaking concern taong bayan sa issue ng inflation, food inflation, kaysa sa issues ng confidential fund, as important as it is. So actually, I'm surprised that there was still an 11-point downward for Sara, even if it looks like the confidential issue in theory should not be as much as a big issue. Again, allegation, of course, allegations about potential anomalies. We're not saying that that's the case per se. But let's talk about this. I mean, I also agree with you, Ronald, and that was why I was thinking about it. Na kailangan natin ng what I call grand coalition because it changes the narrative, no? It shifts the blame. It's not all about Marcos Jr. trying to prove us all wrong, but it's about us all invested in the ruling coalition because you have people like Pangilinan potentially there or people like Marojas there. Yeah, I mean, it makes things interesting. It changes the narrative. But ngayon hindi. There are fault lines with perhaps the Dutertes, but the opposition is not openly there in the front. I mean, we know, of course, Ronald, behind the scenes, marami sa mga alam natin, may mga engagements, pero walang face walang Marojas level face or Kiko Pangilinan kind of face. And I think that would have changed things. But you're right. Obviously, it's also about actual changes on the ground. Now, speaking of the cabinet, I raised some eyebrows last year when I said, baka naman yung technocrats niya can be considered as best and brightest. Diba? Obviously, this is not Marcos senior level of technocrats. Hindi ito mga Jerry Sikat, Harvard PhD, industrial policy type of guy. But, I was thinking about it, joke, no, Balisacan. Okay, not bad. In fairness naman, you can say a thing or two about them. Balisacan, fantastic background as NEDA in the past and agricultural economies. Joke na naman, he thinks also outside the box, monetary expansion policy during pandemic, so on and so forth. But I heard some of the other Ivy League guys, business people messaging me like, I'm not sure about the best and brightest, but this is definitely reassuring compared to what could have been. Like it could have been worse. Kumbaga, that's what I got. But this is it, Ronald. So many travels, so much pledges, 68 billion pesos in pledges, right? Ang daming travels. Paulit-ulit pa sa ibang bansa, nakailan na ba sa Asia, nakailan ba sa US, etc. Bumaba pa yung foreign direct investments. And now you have Balisacan coming out and saying maybe we have to do more about this. Like, yeah, exactly. That's what I've been saying. Then, konting blame game pa nangyayari. Yung nagpapasa ng blame. Let's be honest, Ronald. I think you and I agree on this. I think there's another department other than Department of Finance or NEDA that I think should be more responsible investment promotions, right? And I think that's DTI, right? Which is exactly why I thought bringing in Marojas would have made perfect sense politically. But also Marojas is, he knows his stuff. I mean, he was a pretty good guy in the DTI back in the day, right? Kaya nga, Mr. Palenque Marojas. So, number one sa Senate back in the day. So, I don't know, what is your take naman on the technocratic side? Because ito bumaba rin ang numbers niya sa ABC. Let's be honest, hindi naman masyadong apektado ang ABC as much as E or even D. Pagdating sa presyo ng bigas, 5 to 10 pesos per kilo is something that I think the more upper class Filipinos can deal with. But obviously, a lot of them are unhappy. I think 22% yung decline ni BBM sa ABC. So I think there's looking at the broader economy, slowing down, 5% lang instead of 7-8%. Investments really not coming in. And twice pa siya na Grand Prix sa Singapore. Ano ba nakuha natin sa mga talk niya with Lee Hsien Loong and all of these people? So, yun nga it's not also working well on that front, on the more high-end, posh commercial diplomacy front. Hindi lang pumalpak itong food security promises, hindi rin gumaganang sa kabila. So, Ronald, realistically, again, two of us as political strategists, what would be our advice to the administration? Again, of course, free-tong advice because we don't want to work for certain administration. But what would be your advice on this front naman?
Well, una mag-purge siya. No? Na, halimbawa, yung kanyang senior undersecretary sa Department of Agriculture na-involved dito sa mga fiasco sa sugar, no? Naging na-involved dito sa mga fiasco sa agriculture. Namili ng arbitrarily tatlong importers ng sugar at hindi naman bumaba yung presyo ng sugar dramatically, no? Mukhang maraming problema yung senior undersecretary na yan maliban sa kanyang edad, no? Ikalawa, baka kailangan niya i-consider ano ba nangyayari sa Department of Transportation, no? because maraming mga big ticket projects ang nandyan. At yan yung nakikita ng mga tao. Bakit hanggang ngayon yung airport hindi naayos? No, ito yung mga dramatic na in the scheme of things ay baka hindi ganoon kalaki yung epekto sa economy, pero yan yung nakikita ng mga tourist na papasok. Yan yung nakikita ng mga karaniwang tao na mga OFW, ng mga nagta-travel within the Philippines na bakit ganito ah, kawalang kwenta yung services sa ating airport. So yun yung ikalawa. Ikatlo, yung trade. Bakit puro pirma ng pirma? Hindi nga 68 more than 80 billion yung bilang nila. So, meron na bang pumasok diyan? Sabi mo nga, lalo pang lumalabas yung FDI. At hindi lang lumalabas, mataas 30%. No? Hindi siya increments, no? Malalaki, no? Yung iyong Finance Secretary, bagamat sabi mo nga meron naman siyang rigorous background, pero parang kinakapos siya ngayon. Kinakapos siya rito ngayon sa kanyang mga fiscal policy at sa kanyang mga advice sa presidente. Baka time to retire na rin, no? Time to retire na rin, no? Dahil time to join Maharlika. Doon na siya mag full time sa Maharlika. Yung Department of Labor mo, mukhang natutulog sa pansitan, no? Napanood ko siya last Labor Day. Walang anything significant nung May 1. So, siyempre matanda na rin siya. Pero ayun, hindi ko na alam kung ano yung kanyang kaya pang ma-deliver. So meron kang mga several na baka pagpahingahin mo na, no? At yung mga sinasabi mo nga, mamili ng mga outside of the box, no? Na mas potentially mas may kakayanan at who will change the narrative, no? Lalo na dito sa downward trend ng kanyang approval ratings, no? Yun yung political value nun. Yun yung political value. Pero sinasabi nga natin, Richard, ito ay iba't iba pang mga variables. Hindi siya isa lang magkakadikit siya, no? Halimbawa, habang pinag-uusapan natin ito, no, ay yesterday nangyari yung talagang pagtanggal ng CIIF ng Vice President at Secretary of Education with finality at least sa House, 'di ba? Nangyari 'yan, no? Kaya nga sabi ni Montalban, gera na, no? War has been declared, no? Yun yung ikalawa ay may sumulpot na kaso labang kay GMA dito sa paggamit ng malampaya funds, no? Tapos a few days before that ay yung mga appointed ni former President Duterte sa Malacanang, 2 undersecretaries, no, 4 or 5 directors, etc.
Natin
natanggal.
Yun, separate episode on that. I think that'll be the realignment.
Yes. Parang sinasabi ko lang na ito ay mag-i-impact how the President conducts himself, how the President confronts this parallel operations. Mag-i-impact yan aside from inflation, no, aside from the cabinet, doon sa kanyang approval rating.
Okay, Ronald, first of all, let me say congratulations to Gilas Pilipinas. I cannot believe. Apparently, so nakita ko sa comments, nanalo ang Gilas Pilipinas by 1 point. Katulad ng
Talaga? Ba? Narinig ka yata.
I mean, yata tayo. Swerte tayo. Kasi kanina ako checking third.
May mga tumatalon ba na senador? May mga tumatalon na
Wala nga Kaya nga siguro 1 point lang. Kung andun si Bato, siguro 20 points na naman yung tambak. So, wow, 77 to 76. So sa fourth quarter, ito na naman, nag-next level na naman si Justin Brownlees. So congratulations sa Gilas Pilipinas. Proud na naman tayo. Very, very happy about that. So ito na, siguro ready na tayo next for gold medal.
Baka makatulong yan para yung political fortunes ng presidente magbago.
At least may good news tayo ngayon. Kasi kanina medyo depressed na ako kasi third quarter medyo lutong hangin na Pero bumawi naman ang Pilipinas. Kabaliktaran ng kahapon kasi sa Iran, sa fourth quarter sila natatalo. Bumawi sila. So, this is the first time since 1990. Panahon mo na yan na nag-finals. And the same si Coach Cone din yata, Team Cone nung time na yan or something like that. So, maybe we can talk about that more. But I think that was the perfect segue, speaking of China. The next topic natin, next episode natin, pag-usapan naman natin ang geopolitical strategy. So, hindi lang tayo political strategists, Ronald, we are geopolitical strategists. thank you so much, Ronald Llamas, for being a fantastic co-host for this latest episode ng R&R. Gagawan pa natin ng special logo itong R&R natin, no? Mamaya, alam mo na, pupush natin iba para gawin TV program to. Okay? Yan ang ticket natin, Ronald, na gawin itong pangsunod sa Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Secretary Llamas. Let's talk, of course, next naman about West Philippine Sea and China. We're taking off from very good news. We really need, I think BBM should be very happy now.
We're just talking about changing the narrative. Suddenly, it happened.
If I am BBM, I'll talk about basketball for the next 6 months. All right? Maraming salamat everyone for joining us for another episode ng R&R. Salamat din dun sa mga nag-update sa akin si ASD9 na panalo palang Gilas. Akala ko sarcastic yan and all. I couldn't believe it. Wow, so proud to be Filipino. Sarap maging Filipino pag ganyan. Pero bago tayo pumunta dyan, pag-usapan natin ng not so happy things. Salamat, Secretary Llamas. Oops, munti ko na off pala to. Okay. 1 second. Saan ko ba ito? Okay.